The morning was slow and quiet, the sun was not fully up. A light wind moved softly through the office compound. The mango tree outside swayed gently, its leaves looking tired. Mandy sat behind the reception desk, resting her face in one hand. Her other hand moved lazily over her phone screen. She wasn't really reading anything, just flipping through pages, trying to pass the time. She looked perfect. Her dress was neat, clean, and tight. Her lips were painted soft red. Her hair was tied into a smooth bun. She looked like someone from a fashion magazine. And she knew it. She believed she was smart, beautiful, and important. She hated the fact that the security guard had not arrived early. Because of that, she had to open the gate herself that morning. She felt it was not her job. She thought to herself, I am too educated and too classy for this. I should not be standing at gates. That is not my place. Just then, she heard footsteps outside. They were slow and heavy. It sounded like the person had been walking for a long time. Dust rose from the ground with each step. She looked up, ready to frown and shout. But when her eyes met the man walking toward her, she paused. He looked tired and poor. His shirt was once blue, but now it was faded and dusty. His trousers were old and torn at the edges. His slippers were thin and almost broken. His skin was dark, not just from the sun, but from life's hardships. His beard was untrimmed, and in one hand, he held a squeezed nylon bag. He looked like someone who had been through too much. "Good morning," he said in a gentle voice. It was soft and calm, as if he didn't want to disturb anything. Mandy stared at him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cold with no smile. "Please," the man said quietly, "I am hungry. If there is any leftover food from your canteen or anywhere, I will be very grateful. I don't want money, just a little food." Mandy raised her eyebrows. She laughed, just a short, sharp laugh full of pride. "You came to an office building to beg for food?" she said. "Is that what people do now? You're walking around begging receptionists?" The man said nothing. He stood there, calm. He didn't get angry or look ashamed. His shoulders were still, and he held his bag quietly. He looked at her, straight into her eyes, but not with hate. His eyes were patient, soft. "Go away," Mandy said, waving her hand. "Go and beg somewhere else. This is not a kitchen. We work here. Do you think we have food to throw away for people like you?" Still, the man said nothing. He only nodded slowly. His face didn't change. He looked at her gently and said, "Thank you." Then he turned and walked away. Mandy watched him leave. She wasn't sure why she kept looking at him. Something about him stayed in her mind. Maybe it was the way he looked at her without anger. Maybe it was the way he still said thank you even after she had mocked him. She shook her head and looked back at her phone. But something had changed. Her fingers could not scroll anymore. Her chest didn't feel calm. That evening, a message came to the office group chat. A new executive director was coming to the company next week, and contract staff like Mandy could now apply to become permanent staff. Mandy smiled as she read the message. Her eyes were shining with excitement. "This is it," she whispered. "This is my chance. I've worked hard and waited long enough. Now they will see what I can do." She had no idea the man she insulted that morning was not just a poor stranger. He wasn't gone. He hadn't disappeared. He was walking away quietly because sometimes life waits, watches, and later speaks through the same people we once ignored. That night, Mandy couldn't sleep well. She took out her best dress and laid it across her bed. It was simple but beautiful. She had already ironed it 3 times. She checked again for any wrinkle. She wanted to walk into that interview room looking like a woman who belonged there. A woman who deserved more than a contract job. A woman who was ready for success. Her mother called her that evening to pray. Mandy listened with a small voice. When the call ended, she cried a little. Quiet tears on her pillow. Not because she was afraid, but because her heart felt heavy. Something deep inside her was not at peace. Her dreams that night were strange. She saw many faces and many footsteps. But one face kept returning again, and again the man with the nylon bag. His eyes were not angry, just quiet and knowing. When she woke up early, she sat at the edge of her bed staring into her mirror. For one moment, she didn't see her own face. She saw his. She shook her head and stood up. She got dressed slowly. She rubbed lotion into her skin with care. She wore the dress. She tied her hair into the same neat bun. Then she looked in the mirror and whispered to herself, "You deserve this." When she arrived at the office, it was already busy. Many staff were standing in small groups. Some were fixing their shirts and ties. Others were reading from papers. The air was full of nervous laughter, soft perfume, and the sound of shoes. Mandy walked past them. Her file was in one hand, her bag in the other. Her eyes were fixed on the glass door that led to the interview room. She looked strong and focused. She had prepared for this moment. She was number 7 on the list. She sat and waited. Her name was called. Mandy stood up. Her legs felt light. Her hands were sweating. Her heart was beating fast. She walked toward the room slowly. When she opened the door and stepped in, she saw 3 men sitting behind a long table. But her eyes locked onto only one, the man in the middle, and her heart stopped. Mandy froze as soon as her eyes met his. The man in the middle seat was not wearing the dusty shirt or the worn slippers anymore. He wore a clean dark blue suit with shiny silver buttons. His black shoes were polished. His beard was neatly trimmed. His skin looked smooth and fresh now. But the eyes, those soft, calm eyes, had not changed. They were the same gentle eyes that had looked at her when he asked for food. It was him. The man she had laughed at. The man she had told to leave. The man who had said thank you and walked away quietly. Now he was sitting in the center, behind the table, while she stood in front of him, holding her file with trembling hands. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at her, then gave a small nod and pointed to the chair. Mandy walked slowly to the chair and sat down. Her heart was beating hard. Hands felt cold. She tried not to look at him again. Her fingers tightened around the file, even though he already had a copy in front of him. The other 2 men began the interview. They asked her to introduce herself, talk about her experience, and explain what value she could bring to the company. Mandy tried to answer. Her voice was shaking. Her mind was not focused. She spoke, but her thoughts were far away. She remembered that quiet morning when he had come to the gate. She remembered the tone of her own voice. Go beg somewhere else. She remembered how he didn't argue, didn't shout. He only thanked her and walked away. Now, he was sitting before her, not hungry, not tired, not weak. He was powerful, respected, and clearly important. She was the one shaking. One of the men asked her another question, but she did not respond immediately. She was lost in her thoughts. Then she heard a throat clear. It was him, the man in the middle. His calm eyes were on her again. She pulled herself together and answered the question. She smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. She tried to show confidence, but her heart was heavy. Her words were soft and uncertain. The silence in the room was thick. Even the sound of papers or pens was missing. She had prepared so much for this moment. Her dress was perfect. Her hair was neat. Her experience was good. But none of it could cover the weight in her chest. She had treated someone badly. And now he was sitting in a chair that controlled her future. The other 2 men continued to ask questions. They looked at her file, nodded at some points, and wrote notes. But the man in the middle said nothing. He just watched. When she finally finished her answers, they thanked her and told her she could go. Mandy stood up slowly, bowed slightly, and walked out of the room with weak steps. Her legs felt like they might fail her. Outside the interview room, people were still standing, still talking. But Mandy didn't hear anything. She sat down quietly, her heart still racing. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know what he was thinking. Would he give her a chance? Would he remember her words from that morning? Maybe he would forgive her. Maybe he would not. Thing was sure she had learned something that day that no school could teach her. A few days later, the results of the interview were posted. The names of the people who got permanent positions were listed. Mandy's name was not there. She stared at the list again and again, hoping her name would appear. But it didn't. Her heart sank. She felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She turned and walked out of the office quietly. At home, she sat on her bed. For a long time. Her mother called again to ask how the interview went. Mandy said it didn't go well. Her mother prayed for her again, telling her not to give up, that something better would come. But Mandy knew deep in her heart that she had lost this opportunity not because she was not smart. Not because she was not good enough, but because of something else. Her arrogance. She had judged someone by how he looked. She had looked down on a man who was simply in need. She had let pride control her words. And now, those words had come back to her like an echo. We are working people. We don't throw food to people like you. That sentence played in her head over and over. She remembered his quiet face, his calm "thank you." Mandy sat by her window, watching the evening sky. The sun was setting slowly. The wind moved the curtains gently, just like it had that morning at the gate. She knew she would never forget that man, not because he was the boss, but because he had taught her something without saying much. He had shown her that life is not about how you look. It's not about your shoes or your clothes. It's about how you treat others, especially when you think no one is watching. From that day on, Mandy changed. She became quieter, more humble, more careful with her words. And every time she saw someone in need, she remembered his eyes. The eyes that looked at her without hate. The eyes that forgave her without saying a word. And though she lost the job, she gained something else, something deeper. She gained understanding. She gained wisdom. And most of all, she learned a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life.